Were you recording?
Oh, yeah. Intro.
Welcome to another episode of A Christian and an Atheist Walk into a Bar, featuring Ty, Cleanliness, his next godliness, Gallenbeck, and myself, Jay. Cleanliness and godliness are slightly overrated, Stooksbury. And today, we're going to be talking about a really basic question that usually is kind of at the center of most debates about religion and philosophy.
Yeah.
And that question is, why do bad things happen to good people?
Right.
And before we dive into that, do you want to talk about, we usually we're in the habit of this before, and we kind of spaced it on the last few episodes where we try to feature our beverage of choice. So
That's right.
we better get back in the habit. We were a little rusty.
I mean, we weren't forgetting to drink. Let's be clear about that.
Right.
Like, we
you
had
guys
that
can
part
hear
down.
Yeah, we got that down. We're pros.
We just forgot to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you start. Yours
Okay.
is a little more specific.
Okay. I am drinking Pinner. It's a throwback IPA from Oscar Blues, and I like Oscar Blues. I pretty much like everything that they make, and this is actually one of their more like milder beers too.
Right.
Like it's a kind of a good all-day drinker type.
And it's budget. That's
cheap.
It's
Yeah.
You know, they throw that 16 pack in there and
Yeah.
lower the cost a little. So.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah, that's it. It is in stock because fishing season is getting here. And it's one of my go-to fishing beers.
Yeah.
So,
I hear you on that.
yeah. I am currently drinking a self-made barrel-aged old-fashioned that was made with some old granddad and has been in a barrel for a few weeks now. And
Is it getting better?
it actually is.
Yeah?
Like, I need to do a little. I have some that was pre-mixed before it went in the barrel, some of the extra. And so I actually want to try it side by side to see how much difference there is right now. But it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. So it's hard to go wrong with old granddad, old-fashioned. So I like it. So, yeah, I think just as a little background for people in our community, which we're well aware that a lot of those people are who listen to this. Our community was just rocked by a tragedy, is the only way to describe it.
Yeah.
Where a first grader, I believe he was in first grade, boy passed away from cancer. And it's a girl that I graduated with as the mom. And so it's very, my kids are close to that age. Jay, you have kids close to that age. And so it's something that anytime this happens, it kind of makes you check yourself and really dive deep. And all sorts of questions get raised because of this. I mean, I actually had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a guy who attends church regularly, and he even made the statement, he's about our age and has kids, young kids, and made the statement, he was like, if this happened to me, I don't know what I would do with my faith. He's like, I would have all sorts of questions. And I think that's good because you need to answer that one way or another. And so I think in this case, I'm super interested in, how you wrestle with that. Because you made a statement off air a couple weeks ago when we were recording about this. And so I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where this goes and what all happens.
Yeah. And I think just as you'd referenced to the tragedy, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the first thing that always hits you is just being a parent, and the notion of bearing your child. Just, I can't wrap my head around it, and it's something that I've been thinking of nonstop since it's taken place, and you have those moments where you're a parent, you're tired, you're frustrated, and and you get that moment. It's sad that it takes those types of moments to give you that perspective to say, I have nothing to be, I should just be forever thankful for my
Right.
circumstances right now,
Yeah.
and and I think the comment that you're alluding to is the one of my biggest humps that I always take with me, as far as, like, I call it the hill that I can't get over. When it comes to the notion of religion for me, is that I can't get over the notion that that an all powerful, all knowing, benevolent being could allow a child to go through this experience. Just for me, that's just something that I can't wrap my head around it. And I always hear a lot of different takes on it, and it's always I always feel like the answers that you get usually aren't really answers, but questions to really inspire you to think about how these situations are meant to, think about what's not why did this happen to you, but what is this asking of you. Those are the
Right.
kind of responses that I usually hear, and it's just I still can't. It doesn't get, like, it
Right.
doesn't reach me at all. And I think that's the one thing that, if you could find a way to, like, answer that question, or for me to get an answer to that question, that would probably bring me closer towards a spiritual side of things,
Right.
And but I just can't see that happening.
Yeah.
That's the one thing.
I
And pretty much anything that happens with kids
yeah.
just destroys me.
Yeah. I mean, as a parent, it. I mean, I have faced some tragedies in my life that have been some of the hardest moments of my life. Like
Mhm.
two of my best friends passed away to cancer within a year of each other,
Mhm.
and so tragedy sparks this conversation often.
Mm-hmm.
But with a kid, I think it's even more prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, I mean, working with students, you understand this too. There is no way to describe that bond with a child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't put it into words. You can't express that in any way. The only way to experience that is to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side of that, I cannot imagine, and I'm not going to try to pretend that I know what it's like to go through that.
Right.
I don't.
I
Like,
don't either.
Yeah.
And I don't want to.
No.
And I don't want other people to want to
No,
or
not
to
at
go
all.
through that. Because
I mean,
it kind of it feels a little bit like emotional tourism, right?
Right.
Like we're able to dive into it, but then we're able to go back home at the end of the day.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And to compare it, I think even comparing it to, two of my closest friends feels watered down. Like,
Right.
it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to make sure that's clear,
Mm-hmm.
that we're not saying we know what this is like.
Right.
We're not saying, but how do you wrestle with that situation?
Right.
And so I think for me, as I've gone through this, and I've heard the same things like that you have, and wrestled with those, and come out on the other side of still having faith, but maybe coming to a different understanding that is typically given. One of the things that I say anytime something like this happens, I immediately want to cut off the notion that this was part of God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you use those words together, but this is all part of God's plan. If you use that, then I don't want anything to do with that God either. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because if there's a God that this was part of his plan, then I feel like that's the worst thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to be a part of that. So I immediately try to take that out of the equation. This is not part of God's plan. God did not have any desire for this to happen. God's heart breaks for these kind of situations in the same way
Mm-hmm.
that ours do when we watch something like this take place. This is not his desire. This is not his plan. And so when you start to take that out, I'm not going to ask philosophical questions since you just said questions are not what you're looking for in this situation.
But they're worth still asking.
Yeah, but you start there. I do lean on the fact then that God did not plan or intend for this, but God does use these scenarios. So the analogy seems so terrible at this point, but the MacGyver ability to take anything and make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is, for me, how I view God's kind of role in some of this. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking a lot.
That's okay. Well, and I think when we were kind of planning this topic too, just even the question, why do bad things happen to good people? You can kind of parse that out,
Oh, very much.
because then it's just break it up into halves. What constitutes bad things, and what constitutes good people.
Right.
Because I feel like those are still kind of loaded terms in general too. So when we think of bad things happening, it could range anywhere from natural disasters to what, like leukemia, childhood leukemia,
Right.
or a mass murder or something like that, and I think the general notion is, but it also could be just people with bad luck too, right? People that have lost their job, or they're experiencing hardships, depression, all there's the notion of, I think, kind of just general suffering, I think, is the main concept there. So then I guess my question that I would have for you is, how, if even if you get on the notion that God is not, that's not God's plan for an earthquake to devastate a developing nation, what part of God being all powerful in the vast span of the universe plays into that at all? You know what I mean? Like, how do you get your head around the concept of evil? I guess is kind of a good question to even lead off with.
Well, I'm gonna back up from the evil question. I think,
I kind of threw a lot at you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, that's all right. And we didn't really put a lot of framework on how this episode. So I actually like this.
Yeah.
And I'll get excited, and because this is something I've really wrestled with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so to back up, so how do you take an all-powerful, omnipotent being who desires, according to the book that I believe in, to save all people, to see them prosper, to see these things? How do you take that and rectify what we see in everyday life?
Right. I think that's a way better way of rephrasing it than I did.
Well, and I think, to frame a little more, what is good people, what is bad things.
Right.
Good people in my book is any person.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if you take this idea of God and say all people are God's children, you have to look at all people as,
Sure.
good people. And then bad things, in my mind, like you said, anything that involves suffering and, sometimes, first world problems look a lot different from third world problems, but there is suffering and there is hardship at all these levels.
Sure.
So, okay. So I think if we take a look at design and creation based on what we believe to be Scripture, you look at God's design for the world as perfect. And so you look at the Garden of Eden, you look at all that. This was what God created, and this is what his desire was. So when you talk about God's plan, that's what God's plan was in my mind. He shows us that plan is like, this is what we want it to be. Perfect harmony, perfection, no faults. But part of that is, and a question I've actually been asked by high schoolers, well, if God is perfect, why did he need to create something else? And if you talk about the idea of, when you talk about having a kid, since we're talking about having a kid, even if I'm perfect, having a kid adds something to that. And there's no way to deny that. And when you have a second kid, which you haven't experienced, parents always go through, and I've heard this across the board, this moment of like, I can't love another human being as much as I love this first one. Like this is a dilemma, and yet when that second kid comes, now you do. You have that love for them. And so God creating this, does he need to? No, but it does bring something to the table, something new. But love has to be a choice, and so you have to offer this ability to choose, and this is getting deeper than maybe it needs to, but basically we screwed up that choice. So here's God's plan. He created us to be a part of this. We screwed it up. Fallout happens. All this terrible stuff happens. And so one of the things that I've latched onto is you talk about God's power and is all powerful. Well, my belief is one of God's greatest gifts of power is his restraint of that power. So he allows us to participate in this world that he designed to be perfect, but does not force that upon anyone. And as a parent, I think you get to see that, because when you have a kid, you could force them to do a lot of things the right way. But you also understand, but by forcing that upon them, you're going to inhibit their ability to experience the amazing things that you have that are present in their world. And so in the case of God, if you force this upon them, you're taking away their ability to participate in this with you.
So when you talk about God's as the perfect being and creating humans, and humans being the imperfect beings screwing things up, how is it that something that's created in his image, then something that's intended to be the reflection of God, be imperfect?
I would. That's it. That's good.
Because I have a quote that I was
Okay.
looking this up on my phone.
Yeah, do it.
I'm a big fan of. I'm digging for it right now. Hopefully, I could find it in time.
Well,
but basically, gosh, I might have to come back to this one. But basically, the idea that if human beings are these kind of bumbling fools, and we're created in the image of God, do we have to then assume that God is a bumbling fool?
right.
That's, I guess, kind of the question.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things I tell leaders often, and as I'm going through this stuff, is it's always okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
At least now.
Yeah.
And
I wish people said it more often, actually.
And I think that would be my initial response.
Yeah. That's
but at
okay.
some level, I think there is also this idea of, so if this supernatural being and everything that played out has played out, at some point he did create beings that were more than us. If you look at, even on some poetic level, Satan and angels and all of those things that I will never be able to wrap my head around, which if you could, that would undersell it a lot anyways. But if that was the initial creation and there was these things and there was a rebellion, were humans an attempt to create a being to partake in this adventure with at a not godlike level? I don't know. I don't know. I think a reflection can be. I mean, when you initially said that, my first thought was, well, if I look at my reflection in a lake, it is not a perfect representation.
Sure.
And so, but that's kind of a sellout answer too.
But yeah, I get what you're saying.
I mean, there could be a difference there.
Well, and like I said, you don't have to have the answer for it. Mm-hmm. But these are the questions that I think are important to ask, though, too.
Right.
And I really respect the fact that you have the humility to say, I don't know. I think that's something I always try to emphasize, too, is that those are probably the three most underused words in the English language. And it's okay to not know, because that's the whole point of causing you to step back and question your initial axioms and question the values that you might have maybe have not been skeptical about before, or cause you to even read more into it, or just cause more conversation. Like we keep going back and forth on this.
Right.
So rather than get too wrapped up in it, maybe we can kind of change the subject or kind of divert a little bit. You'd said before about when we were talking about good people, and you say that all people are good.
Right.
Do you think there is a concept of evil within humanity? Do you think someone can be an evil person?
Yes, I think that happens. I do not. And this is a debate within even theology. You know, the idea of original sin, and that when we are born, we are inherently evil.
Right.
And I fight against that a lot, especially the moment you hold your child. Like, to think that being is evil is haunting.
And this is a sidebar. That's another huge hump. And I know that's not all it's not all religions that hold tight to that, but it's a little bit more of the fundamental versions of it. The notion that my son, if he were to die, that he would be in hell.
Right,
because of baptism and all that sort of stuff.
That's a whole nother.
That's a whole other hill, right?
Yes,
and I know that's not a fair thing to apply that to all, because I know that's not the case.
Right,
but it's definitely one that has always gotten my goat.
Yeah, and I am not a proponent of original sin in that from the beginning we are evil. I think by the time you're 2, you can kind of see that, because terrible 2s will change your mind real quick.
My son has moments of evil,
but
especially at 3 a.m.
I think by design, if you look at, again, I'm going based on the text that I consider to be Scripture. The design of creation was for humans to be perfect. And so if that's what I believe this is, then I believe when humans are created, they're designed to be perfect. Now, how fast and how far that swings, I think, is based on a lot of factors. But if you believe in God and you believe in Scripture, then you got to believe in evil and you got to believe in the other side of things. And so, is there evil? Yes. Do people choose and make those decisions? Absolutely. I mean, last episode we put out, there are people that are choosing to do horrendous evil things, which then you're going to say, okay, well, okay, cancer is not a choice.
Right.
So how is this kid choosing evil? Well, if the world's falling apart and we ruined it, who's to say we haven't created this situation that's causing these things? Which is an interesting, if you get on an evolution side of things, to say, okay, if humans have created everything that starts cancer, then is this an evolution of evil that is now part of what we've done to the perfect creation that was designed in the beginning?
So are humans reaping what they're sowing?
In some sense, yes.
That's an interesting way to look at it. So then I guess the one thing I could throw back at that then, if you're getting into the concept of the evolutionary scale, then what about mass extinction caused by humanity? Is the woolly mammoth less of God's creature?
What I would not say, I would say no, but is that something that we've caused because of the fallout of everything that was designed? Sure. I think that's very possible. Is squishing an ant, an act of evil? I don't know.
Right.
Mosquitoes, like, let's go there.
Yeah,
like,
screw mosquitoes.
Yeah, exactly. They have the technology to eradicate mosquitoes, and they won't use it because they're afraid of how it could affect everything else.
Sure.
But
and we liken a malaria outbreak every now and then too.
But
West
if you
Nile.
do eliminate them, what does it affect? Like,
right. Yeah, the
humans
ecosystem
can't even wrap their mind around that. And so I think, the things we've had effect on a large scale are probably far beyond what we can wrap our head around.
Sure. I think the one thing that I always struggle with this question is that it's almost inherently self-centered in terms of it's kind of the way we think about these things, right? What if this happens to me? What does this mean? That's how these questions come up, and I think the notion, and when we talk about bad things happening to good people, we get this notion that there are powers that are out to get us. You know what I mean? And I don't know if I necessarily see it that way. And this is maybe my reductive way of looking at life, though I think in the grand scheme of things, humanity represents 20,000 years as far as when Homo sapiens broke off from the Neanderthals and we started, taking over and killing off species and things like that. But then in the grand scheme of things of the Earth, that's nothing in terms of millions and millions of years. In the grand schemes of the universe as a whole, it's still nothing in terms of billions of zeros that I don't even want to try to look up on my phone right now. So when we think about we're lucky if we make it 80 years within that particular vast time frame. And to think that all of the powers of the universe are targeting you at this very moment is very extraordinarily self-centered. You know what I mean? And so that's why I don't know if I feel like there's like bad forces that cause these things. I see it more as atoms crashing into atoms, and different atoms who might be better equipped or who are already well-formed organisms are able to withstand some things better, and it just kind of scales up from there. And it's such a weird thought for me to think that this is something that's like the notion that what Murphy's Law, whatever bad's going to happen, whatever bad can happen will, I think that's how it goes. But just these notions of intentional forces, I guess, whether good or evil or whatever the case may be, I don't know if I necessarily believe them in the grand cosmic scheme of things.
Right.
I think things just happen, and I think that's not the most secure feeling. And I think when we reach these moments that really rock our consciousness, really rock our sense of morality, and whatever you hold dear to yourself, you are always like reaching for something to compartmentalize and to make sense of it. And I'm not really sure that that's really out there,
Right.
And I think that's probably why religion's always been a good way to address those questions and provide that solace for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Religion's been the best form of human cooperation, even if it's caused a lot of problems, but it's been able to bring a lot of people together at the same point too.
Right.
So yeah, and I'm kind of rambling here, I guess, again, but that's the way that I see it, in as far as the grand cosmological perspective of it, as far as the notion that this is just something that, in the grand scheme of things, we don't matter. And that's very, I guess, nihilistic for me to say, but it's the only really thing that really makes me helps me wrap my head around the whole thing,
Right. And this is where I would throw questions back in. And number one, I agree on our time on this earth is so minimal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start talking about eternity, it becomes even less of a blip on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about atoms colliding and better prepared atoms and all of those things. And to sit back and think, okay, so in this situation that started this conversation, so this person was less prepared to deal with this world.
No, I'm not saying it's the person, because the way I see it is, I guess it's more of the naturalist view of the thing. So there's so much that goes into why, just to be specific, why does cancer happen?
Right.
Why does someone get cancer? I mean, if we had the answer to that, we wouldn't be sitting in your garage right now, because we don't know. We have a good idea of different environmental effects. We have a good idea about people's genetic disposition for being able to get cancer.
But their genetic being, so that person is less capable of managing the things that cause cancer.
Sure, I guess that's a way to put it. And I guess I think that's the problem too about when we say something like that. It makes it sound like you're making a value statement about the person,
right?
Like they're
nothing to do with that.
Right. I'm not saying people who are predisposed to cancer are less of a human being.
Correct.
No. It's something that's so complexly built into our genetic code and compounded by environmental factors that trying to pinpoint the one exact moment or exact causality of the whole thing is just, you can't do it.
Right.
I mean, I certainly can't do it.
No, I don't think anyone can.
Yeah.
And then now I gotta remember what the other thing I was gonna say. Oh, so the other side of things that I always wrestle with is if none of this matters,
mm-hmm.
and none of the it's just a blip on the radar. There's no reason. It's 80 years and done.
Why bother?
What? Not even why bother, but why morality at any level?
Right. And I struggle with this too, because I do consider myself to be a moral human being,
and I would agree with that.
And I do believe that I have core principles that translate into a lot of the things that I do. But then when I come back to it, is what is that based of? What's the foundation of it?
Why do you care?
Right, exactly. And I don't really have a good answer for that other than
I don't know.
I don't know, right? And to kind of go back to the I guess what I try to view it as is what if I don't know what those core foundations are, if I'm not certain that if I have natural rights that are endowed by a creator, I at least can abide by the notion that I don't want to see suffering in the world. I can at least know, and that I think that's just my own personification, and it's your own self-centeredness, that if I don't want to suffer, I should try to help other people avoid suffering too. I think I'm more free when other people are free as well, and I think those are kind of things those are values that are just vague in the best sense that I can articulate now after a little bit of beer. But those are just something that I consider core to my being, that I just know to be inalienably right. But at the same point too, I know that in the grand scheme of things, if you, I'm reading a book now called Sapiens that's gotten me thinking a lot about this, and it talks about the cognitive revolution, and it's basically the point where Homo sapiens separated themselves from the rest of the food chain because we can think. Long story short, and we could think amazing things. We can think of complex mathematical equations, and we can, with certain limitations, but we can come up with all these great conceptual things. But at the end of the day, everything that we've used to organize ourselves as the human species is mostly the result of our imagination. It's the result of our cognitive ability to imagine something. It's our cognitive ability to imagine a community. What does it mean to be an American?
Right.
Does it mean that you're born here? Does it mean that you have certain values that you ascribe to? What does it mean to be a Christian? Well, there's all these imagined notions, and what are human rights?
Right.
These are made up things that we've come up with cognitively as human beings for the purposes of human cooperation and organizing our society in general. And I think about that, and it just makes life seem absolutely pointless, But it's true at a certain level,
Right.
Because we do have to. I mean, nobody imagines that they're part of the Babylonian Empire anymore. Nobody imagines themselves as part of the Ming Dynasty.
Well, there is Ren fairs.
Yeah, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there's these imagined notions, right? But like just the notion that something like human rights can be imagined makes me even question, like, well, why do I even bother like fighting for free speech or things like that? So that's what probably causes me to drink. Because there's these big questions that I don't know, and and then I end up here.
There you go.
In your garage.
And that's why we're here.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, for me, I, in some ways, have fallen on the other side of that. Because for me, if I didn't believe in a creator and a being that this is how things were designed to be, and it was all just randomness, and it was all just haphazard, and 80 years and you're done, I have moments and opportunities probably every day where I could make my life a lot easier and a lot more functional and a lot more comfortable and a lot more wealthy and whatever you want to tie to that. But because of moral standards, choose not to.
Mm-hmm.
And because watching someone else suffer makes me hurt. And there's a connectedness amongst humans for the most part. And so to see someone else suffering, to see someone else going through pain hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I believed that it was just me for 80 years and this is all it was and it was done, I think I'd have a very different approach to day-to-day life.
Sure.
And so we've talked before that there's a path you walk to and it gets to an end and there's a point where it becomes I don't know on both sides of this.
Right.
And we've just chosen to fall on different sides of that I don't know-ness.
Right. And and I think in the grand scheme of things then how we identify on whatever that side is doesn't really matter. This kind of reminds me of this. I had a friend that was another kind of activist-minded, secular individual who it was right around the time when Sam Harris and Bill Maher were really big into criticizing Islam and basically saying like, look, you can't be advocates for women's rights, for secularism, and also be a supporter of kind of what is happening in a lot of Islamic majority countries, which that's a whole other conversation,
Right.
A whole other rant and raving, and very emotional on a lot of sides there. But I had a friend that was just like, he'd actually done work in the Middle East, made a lot of great contacts and friends while he was over there, and he's like, man, there's some really good people doing really good things, and they're also really bad things are happening to them too. And I don't believe in Allah. I don't follow. I felt so out of place so often in their culture just because there is a very spiritual culture. But at the same point too, it was always me that felt that. They never like ostracized me or anything like that. They were always welcoming and they always, prepared me meals, and I never felt more warmth. And but for me to question their intentions just because we disagree on this one little question, and I guess for some it's bigger than others.
Yeah, it's like one little
one. Again, It's that hill, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't get over that. Like they're still my friends. They're still my compatriots. Like I still would fight by their side on a lot of different things. So to me, that's not even really that important,
Right.
So yeah, I kind of keep coming back to that as well. Is that we have our own reasons, and whatever those reasons may be, you call it God, I call it, I don't know. But we still find a way to manage and still move forward and still be productive members of society that try to contribute positively to our community to the best of our ability,
Right.
And I think most people fall into that category. I think everybody's doing the best that they can, that they know how to.
Yeah. I think the majority of people believe that fellow humans have value at some level.
Right.
I feel like we've got on a huge tangent at this point.
We have.
I feel like we've strayed a little from the topic.
That's okay.
I was trying to figure out, how do I tie this back in?
I don't know.
We're a long ways from where we started.
But that's okay, though.
But I think there were some good questions raised. I think there was, there's not always going to be answers.
No.
And I think...
Well, and I think to tie it back into the original question, though, is why do good things or why do bad things happen to good people? is that there really isn't
Right.
an answer to that question.
Yeah.
You know,
There's not an easy answer.
No,
but
no.
have one.
Right.
At least wrestle with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at least try to contemplate it a little bit and try to be fair as well.
Yes.
And understand that different people are coming from different perspectives and different life experiences that shape the way that they hold those values and the way that what they consider good and what they consider bad and in where they see themselves fitting into the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I could not agree with that point more. And if you're a Christian and you believe in an all-loving God, do not say it's part of His plan when bad things happen.
Yeah.
That's not helping people on either side, because the people who are going through that do not want to hear that.
Right.
And the people that are on the other side,
it's really bad PR.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
It's like, yeah, exactly.
So I think this is one of those where two different sides can agree to not having an answer.
Yeah, agree to disagree, but not even really disagree. But
not
just
disagree.
Just realize that there's just kind of this nebulous region. I think that's the ultimately where even you and I come from it as far as the way you categorize it. You know, what you don't know, you contribute to faith. You know, like I have faith that this is
Right.
the way things are, and to me, I just say like I just don't know.
Right.
And I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And I don't try to attribute it to any sort of force or anything like that, or I do in a more naturalistic sense.
Right.
You know, I see it in the grand scheme of things of physics or whatever you want to call it. So
I don't understand a lot of calculus, but that's
I hate
not
calculus.
Really faith.
No,
that's just I'm kind of dumb.
Well, and calculus is awful. That's just scientific fact. I'm pretty sure.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
I'll go with that. I would say geometry is more evil than calculus, but now we're on a whole different tangent. So
tune in next week on what's the most evil math
That's right.
in the world.
I do feel like we have raised a bunch more topics to talk about in weeks to come. I also would say if you guys have anything you want to hear us talk about and you're like, hey, what about this question? We were sent a great article online this week that will definitely be a topic of future conversation about morality. We love those because we want more topics. We want to have these conversations.
And even provide your feedback to the question that we asked. You know, what's your experience? I mean, I think the one thing about this is that every type of tragedy that brings us to it is so deeply personal, you know?
Right.
So where do you stand on and what events led you to that point too? So I always like to hear those types of things.
Absolutely. Connect with us, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those things. Download, listen on all of the appropriate podcast providers. Please, on iTunes, even though Jay still believes it to be Satan, except he doesn't believe in any of that, leave us a review on iTunes. 5 stars help us actually get to a point where iTunes recognizes that we have listeners.
That we exist.
Exactly. So find us at all those places. If you don't like stuff we're saying, hey, reach out. We would love to hear criticism. We are not good at this.
Yeah, obviously.
We're learning as we go, but we would love feedback and would love to make this better. Ask questions. Keep sending us stuff. And Jay, close us out here.
You're listening to a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar where we say, I don't know. One drink
adult beverage at a time.
Cheers.